Gentlelady from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Yanis, Abbott Nutrition, Mead, and Perrigo control 90% of the infant formula market, correct? Yeah. And at the time of the infant formula recall last year, Abbott manufactured 43% of the powdered infant formula produced in the U.S. Is that correct?
That sounds approximately correct.
And so I think it's fair to say that any impact in supply from any one of these companies would profoundly impact the supply of formula for all Americans. And I wanted to dig into a little bit more of what happened at Abbott last year. Now, you, of course, were at the FDA during the Abbott recall last year, correct?
I was.
And at that time, in October of 2021, the FDA received a whistleblower complaint regarding the sanitation conditions of Abbott facilities in Sturgis, Michigan. Could you recall some of the details of what that whistleblower complaint alleged?
I can. It was a lengthy letter, 34 pages, I believe. There were allegations of falsification of records, of trying to keep information away from federal inspectors. There were very serious allegations, I thought, in that whistleblower complaint.
And after that complaint, the FDA did launch an investigation in January of 2022, correct?
Prior to that, they interviewed the informant, but they did go inspect that facility in January of 2022.
And in fact, it seems that the conditions were so horrible in this facility that the DOJ initiated a criminal investigation into the unsanitary workplace conditions in the Sturgis facility. Is that correct?
That has been documented in the public literature, but I would say that's a conversation you should have with the DOJ.
And Abbott, as we also know that Abbott faced a number of lawsuits alleging tainted baby formula long before the recall happened. Following a 7-year legal battle for one family whose infant suffered debilitating brain damage, Abbott successfully sought a court order sealing trial testimony and evidence regarding Abbott's testing and food safety protocols in that same plant. And that was 7 years before the consumption of unsafe formulas resulted in the deaths of several more infants that led to this shortage. We also see a pattern here that the Abbott company, which produces Similac and other major formulas, used ruthless tactics during their legal team to bury a lot of this information that its baby formula was causing brain damage or death in children for years before the recall happened. But I wanted to look a little bit and dig into the FDA's authorities that you were speaking into and what we need to do to prevent something like this from happening again. Mr. Yanis, to kind of repeat the point earlier, does the FDA currently have the authority to require firms to notify the FDA of positive results even when it does not leave the facility?
It does not.
It does not. And is the FDA, in your view, adequately funded to launch more aggressive and resourced to launch more aggressive inspections in these types of facilities?
I believe we can do more with the existing resources. Clearly, with more resources, there's even more you can do. But I think with the current existing resources, we can do a good job with infant formula.
And does the FDA currently have a clear congressional authority to issue a mandatory recall instead of just relying on these corporations to voluntarily issue a recall?
We do through something called the Food Safety Modernization Act for foods under FSMA. Infant formula has its own rule. My experience has been if you present a firm with the evidence, you can execute a recall much faster than relying on a mandatory recall. If needed, the agency won't hesitate to use it, but that takes longer. And usually the quickest path to action is to present the evidence so that the company will do so, and they usually do.
And so going back through this timeline here, Abbott did issue that voluntary recall after the FDA presented its evidence, correct?
It did.
And so in your assessment, kind of looking through these things, it would be helpful, and one of the things that we should probably move on this committee is to empower the FDA to require those firms to notify you. And I know you had mentioned earlier about perhaps some additional measures, but for the purpose of the committee and the proceedings, Are there any other additional provisions that you would emphasize as well for us to consider?
I would. Thank you for that very good question, because I think we're all trying to prevent things like this from happening in the first place. And I agree 100%. The primary responsibility resides on Abbott. Abbott bears this because they ran an operation that was under a lack of control, insanitary, and producing products that were prone to contamination. We need to make Cronobacter a nationally notifiable disease. We need to strengthen infant formula manufacturing standards, and we need to use state-of-the-art modern manufacturing approaches. Some of these plants, as you know, are very old. I refer to them as legacy facilities built in the 1940s. In the Abbott Sturgis facility alone, there was a spray dryer that had multiple cracks that was purchased and installed in the 1960s. That piece of equipment is older than I am. There's a lot that has changed. We know a lot more now. We should require that they strengthen their preventative controls. Another thing we should do is we should ask them to do more robust verification that their procedures are working. One of the Achilles heel that has allowed the agency to become complacency is that our rule currently says infant formula must be tested at an N=30 sampling plan. That means that 30 samples are taken, 10 grams of sample per each, 300 grams are tested for Cronobacter sakazaki. Some of these manufacturing runs can be huge, 50, 60,000 pounds. 300 grams is insignificant, and the probability of them finding contamination is virtually zero. It's been a free pass for them to say, it's tested negative, we can sell this product.
Thank you.